As the first amber light of dawn spilled across the dusty plains of West Texas, Zara Reynolds buried her mother with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Each shovelful of dirt felt heavier than the last, her tears mixing with the sweat on her face in the early morning heat of summer 1873. At 22, she hadn't expected to be alone in the world with nothing but a small ranch drowning in debt, and a brother who'd returned from the war a different man entirely. Zara patted the last of the soil down over the fresh grave, marked only by a simple wooden cross she'd fashioned herself. "I'll be all right, Mama," she whispered, though the hollow feeling in her chest suggested otherwise. The crunch of approaching hoofbeats made her turn. Her brother Elijah sat atop his horse, expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. Once her protector and closest friend, the 4 years he'd spent fighting had transformed him into someone cold and calculating, someone who viewed her as little more than property to be managed. "Finished?" he asked without dismounting. Zara nodded, unable to find words. Their mother had struggled for months with consumption before finally succumbing 2 nights prior. Elijah had been in town during her final moments, drinking away what little money they had left. "Come back to the house. We need to talk." He turned his horse and rode away without waiting for her response. The walk back to the small ranch house felt endless. Their once prosperous cattle operation had dwindled to almost nothing during the war years. Their father had died at Gettysburg, leaving their mother to manage what she could. Now, with both parents gone, Zara knew the burden would fall to her. Elijah might hold the legal rights, but he showed little interest in honest work. Inside, Elijah had already poured himself a glass of whiskey despite the early hour. He motioned for her to sit at the table. "I've found a solution to our financial troubles," he said without preamble. Zara's hands tightened in her lap. "I can work harder. The North Field could be—" "No," Elijah cut her off. "This isn't about your gardening or those few scraggly cattle. I've made an arrangement with Samuel Porter." The name sent a chill through her. Samuel Porter was the wealthiest man in the county, a banker and landowner in his 50s who'd acquired most of his property through foreclosures and questionable dealings. His reputation for cruelty was well known, especially toward his 2 previous wives, both of whom had died under circumstances that raised eyebrows but never formal questions. "What kind of arrangement?" Zara asked, though the sinking feeling in her stomach already suggested the answer. "You'll marry him next Sunday." Elijah took another drink. "He'll pay off our debts and take ownership of the land you'll want for nothing as his wife." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "No," Zara whispered, "I won't do it." Elijah slammed his glass down. "This isn't a request. The arrangements have been made. Porter has already paid me in advance on the dowry." "Paid you?" Zara stood, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. "You sold me." "I secured your future," Elijah snapped. "What else do you think will happen to you, to this place? We're one bad season away from losing everything. At least this way you'll have a roof over your head." "I'd rather sleep under the stars than in Samuel Porter's bed." Zara's voice rose as panic clawed at her throat. "His other wives died of natural causes," Elijah interrupted. "And you do well to remember your place. Father isn't here anymore with his soft ideas about your independence. As your legal guardian, I've made my decision." Zara backed toward the door. "I'll run." Elijah's laugh held no humor. "And go where? With what money? Besides," his voice lowered dangerously, "Porter's coming for dinner tonight to formalize everything. You'll be respectful and grateful for his generosity." "I hate you," Zara whispered, tears burning her eyes. "The war didn't just take your arm, it took your soul." His face hardened. "Get yourself cleaned up and put on your best dress. I expect you downstairs by 6. He turned away, dismissing her. Upstairs in her small bedroom, Zara paced frantically. Her window overlooked the dusty road that wound through their property and into town 10 miles away. She had a little money saved, not much, just a few dollars she'd earned selling eggs and vegetables at the market. Not enough to start over elsewhere, but perhaps enough to buy her time. The sound of an approaching rider drew her attention. Through the window, she spotted a lone figure on horseback coming up the drive. The man sat tall in the saddle, his broad-shouldered frame silhouetted against the midday sun. For a terrible moment, she feared Samuel Porter had arrived early, but as the rider drew closer, she recognized Zachary Caldwell. Zachary Zach, to those who knew him well, had bought the neighboring ranch 2 years ago. Unlike most newcomers who failed within a year, he'd turned his property into one of the most successful operations in the county. At 30, he was respected for his fair dealings and feared for his reputation as one of the fastest guns in the territory, a skill he rarely flaunted but everyone knew he possessed. Zara had exchanged pleasantries with him at church socials and in town, but little more. He'd always been polite but reserved, those intense blue eyes holding secrets he never shared. Now, watching him dismount and tie his horse to the post, Zara felt an unexpected flicker of hope. She hurried downstairs, reaching the front door just as Elijah opened it. "Caldwell," Elijah's greeting was cool. The two men had never gotten along, especially after Zach had caught Elijah cheating at cards in the saloon last winter. "Reynolds," Zach nodded, removing his hat. His gaze shifted to Zara and something in his expression softened momentarily. "Miss Reynolds." "I was sorry to hear about your mother." "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell," Zara replied, aware of Elijah's scrutiny. "What brings you here?" Elijah asked bluntly. "Your south fence is down again. 3 of your cattle wandered onto my property this morning." Zach's voice remained even. "I brought them back and mended the fence temporarily, but it needs proper repair." Elijah shrugged. "I'll get to it when I can." "That's what you said last time," Zach observed. "I can help if you need an extra hand." "We don't need charity," Elijah snapped. "It's not charity to be a good neighbor." Zach's eyes narrowed slightly, then he turned to Zara. "I also brought this." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small basket covered with cloth. "Mrs. Peterson at the general store mentioned your mother had passed." "It's just some bread and preserves." Zara stepped forward to accept the basket, her fingers briefly touching his. "That's very kind, Mr. Caldwell." "Zachary," he corrected gently. "Or Zach. We appreciate the gesture," Elijah interrupted, "but we have matters to attend to." "Porter's coming for dinner." Something flickered in Zach's eyes, recognition, then concern. "Samuel Porter?" "Yes," Elijah said, a note of pride entering his voice. "He and Zara have an understanding." "An understanding," Zach repeated, his gaze returning to Zara, taking in her reddened eyes and tense posture. "We're to be married," Zara said, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. A muscle ticked in Zach's jaw. "I see, congratulations. If that's all, Caldwell," Elijah said pointedly. Zach settled his hat back on his head. "That's all for now." He looked directly at Zara again, his gaze intense. "If you need anything at all, my door is always open to neighbors." With that, he mounted his horse and rode away, but not before casting one last searching look at Zara. Elijah closed the door with unnecessary force. "Stay away from him," he warned. "He was only being kind," Zara protested. "Men like Caldwell don't do anything without a reason." Elijah's expression darkened. "Now go get ready for Porter." Throughout the afternoon, Zara moved like someone in a dream, washing her hair and putting on her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had belonged to her mother. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more desperate than the last. She could run, but where? She could refuse, but Elijah might simply force her. The law would side with him as her guardian. Women had few rights, especially unmarried ones. By 6 o'clock, Samuel Porter's expensive carriage pulled up to their modest home. Zara watched from her window as the portly man in an expensive suit descended, smoothing his gray whiskers with gloved hands. The sight of him made her stomach turn. Downstairs, she plastered a wooden smile on her face as Elijah introduced them formally. Porter's eyes crawled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "You're lovelier than your brother described," Porter said, taking her hand and pressing his lips to it for too long. His breath smelled of cigars and brandy. "Thank you, Mr. Porter," Zara replied automatically, withdrawing her hand as soon as propriety allowed. Samuel, please, he insisted. We'll be husband and wife soon enough. Dinner was an excruciating affair. Zara had prepared a simple meal with what they had: beans, cornbread, and the last of their cured ham. Porter spoke of his business dealings while Elijah nodded enthusiastically, both men ignoring Zara except when Porter would occasionally place his hand on her arm or knee beneath the table. I've taken the liberty of having the marriage contract drawn up, Porter announced as they finished eating. He produced papers from his jacket. Everything is in order. The wedding will be this Sunday after church services. So soon? Zara couldn't help asking. Why wait? Porter's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm not getting any younger and I need a wife to manage my household and produce heirs, of course. Elijah signed the papers without reading them. When Porter handed the pen to Zara, she hesitated. Is there a problem? Porter's tone hardened. No, Zara began. Sign it, Zara, Elijah ordered. With a hand that shook visibly, Zara scrawled her name, feeling as though she were signing away her life itself. Excellent, Porter tucked the papers away. I'll send a carriage for you Sunday morning. Wear something white if you can manage it. After Porter left, Zara confronted Elijah. How could you do this to me? I did what father would have done, secured your future, Elijah insisted. Porter is wealthy and respected. He's a monster. Everyone knows how he treated his other wives. Rumors spread by jealous people. Elijah waved his hand dismissively. You'll learn to appreciate what I've done for you. And what did he do for you? Zara demanded. How much did he pay for me? Elijah's hand struck out so quickly Zara barely saw it coming. The slap knocked her sideways and she tasted blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her cheek. Never speak to me like that again, Elijah said coldly. Go to your room and don't even think about running. I'll be watching. That night, Zara lay awake, her mind working furiously. Sunday was only 3 days away. She had to act quickly. When the house grew quiet and Elijah's snores echoed down the hallway, she carefully packed a small bag with essentials: a change of clothes, her mother's locket, the little money she had saved. She would leave at first light, when Elijah usually slept the deepest. Dawn had barely broken when Zara crept downstairs, carefully avoiding the creaking third step. She had just reached for the door when a voice froze her in place. Going somewhere. Elijah stood in the doorway to the kitchen, a rifle balanced casually in his hands. I thought you might try something foolish, he said, gesturing with the rifle. Back upstairs. Elijah, please, Zara begged. Don't do this. This discussion is over. He motioned with the rifle again. Room. Now, for the next 2 days, Zara was effectively a prisoner in her own home. Elijah removed her door and took her shoes. He only allowed her out to cook and perform necessary chores, watching her constantly. Saturday evening, a large trunk arrived from Porter containing a wedding dress and a note expressing his eager anticipation of their union. Looking at the elaborate white gown spread across her bed, Zara felt a coldness settle over her. There seemed no escape. She would become Porter's wife tomorrow, bound to him legally and physically with no recourse. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. Elijah entered her room early, laying out the dress. Porter's carriage will be here in an hour, he said. Be ready. Left alone, Zara moved mechanically, washing and dressing with numb fingers. The gown was too tight around her waist and low-cut in a way that made her uncomfortable. She stared at her reflection in the small mirror, barely recognizing the pale, frightened woman who stared back. Downstairs, she heard the sound of an approaching carriage. This was it, then. The end of her freedom, perhaps the end of her life if Porter proved to be the monster she feared. Taking a deep breath, she picked up her small bag, the only thing she would take from her childhood home, and descended the stairs. What she found in the parlor stopped her in her tracks. Zachary Caldwell stood in the center of the room, his expression thunderous. Elijah faced him, his own face flushed with anger. This is none of your business, Caldwell, Elijah was saying. Get off my property. Is it true? Zach asked, turning to Zara as she entered. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of her in the wedding dress. "Are you marrying Porter today?" "Yes," she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of her own free will," Elijah added quickly. Zach's gaze never left Zara's face. "Is that true?" The question hung in the air between them. Outside, the sound of another carriage approaching could be heard. "No," Zara said finally, lifting her chin. "It's not true, Zara," Elijah hissed. "He sold me to pay his gambling debts," Zara continued, finding strength in finally speaking the truth. "I'm being forced." Zach's expression darkened further. "That's what I thought." He took a step toward Zara. "Get your things. You're not marrying Porter today." "She most certainly is," came a new voice from the doorway. Samuel Porter stood there, resplendent in an expensive suit, flanked by two men who were clearly hired muscle. "The arrangements have been made." "The arrangements are off," Zach said evenly, turning to face Porter. Porter laughed, a sound without humor. "And who are you to interfere in a legal contract, Caldwell?" "A man who knows what you did to your previous wives," Zach replied, his hand resting casually near his holstered pistol. "A man who won't stand by while another woman is sold to you." Porter's face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. Reynolds, control this situation." Elijah stepped forward, his own hand moving toward the rifle propped against the wall. "Caldwell, I'm warning you, no." Zach's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I'm warning both of you. Zara's not marrying Porter, not today, not ever." "The law is on my side," Porter sputtered. "I have a signed contract, a contract signed under duress," Zach countered. "Zara, did you want to sign that paper?" "No," she answered firmly. "I was forced." "This is absurd," Porter gestured to his men. "Remove this interloper." As the men advanced, Zach's hand moved in a blur, drawing his pistol and cocking it in one smooth motion. "I wouldn't," he advised calmly. The men halted, looking to Porter for instruction. "You can't shoot all of us," Elijah sneered, reaching for the rifle. "I wouldn't bet on that," Zach replied, "but it doesn't have to come to that." He turned to Porter. "You want a wife?" "There are plenty of women who might accept your proposal without coercion. Zara isn't one of them." "I paid good money," Porter began, "and you'll get it back," Zach interrupted. "Every cent. Consider it my wedding present." "Wedding?" Elijah echoed incredulously. Zach's eyes met Zara's. "If she'll have me." Zara felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Was this real? Was Zachary Caldwell the man she'd secretly admired from afar offering to marry her instead? "This is preposterous," Porter bellowed. "Reynolds, do something." Elijah looked torn, his eyes darting between Porter's angry face, Zach's steady gun hand, and the unexpected hope blooming on his sister's face. "Zara," Zach said, his voice gentler now, "you have a choice. You always have a choice." In that moment, staring into Zach's determined blue eyes, Zara knew what she wanted. "Yes," she said. "I choose you." Porter's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this. I have a contract I'm willing to buy out," Zach said firmly. "Name your price." Porter sputtered incoherently for a moment before spitting out, $5,000. "Done," Zach agreed without hesitation, shocking everyone in the room. It was an enormous sum. "I'll have it delivered to your bank tomorrow." "This is irregular," Porter protested, though his greed was clearly calculating the profit. "So is selling your sister," Zach pointed out, glancing at Elijah. "I could involve the sheriff instead if you prefer." At the mention of the sheriff, both Porter and Elijah shifted uncomfortably. "Fine," Porter finally ground out, "but I want that money by noon tomorrow or I'll be back with the law on my side." "You'll have it," Zach promised. He looked at Zara. "Get your things." Zara didn't need to be told twice. She raced upstairs, changed into a simple dress and gathered her meager possessions. When she returned downstairs, Porter and his men had gone. Elijah stood alone with Zach, his expression a mixture of resentment and relief. "You didn't have to do this," Elijah said to Zach. "Porter would have taken care of her. Like he took care of his other wives." Zach's voice was cold. "You're fortunate I don't call you out for what you've done." Elijah flinched but said nothing more. Zara approached her brother. Despite everything, he was still family, the last of her blood. Goodbye, Elijah. I hope someday you find your way back to the person you once were. Elijah wouldn't meet her eyes. The ranch will still be here if this doesn't work out. It was as close to an apology as she was likely to get. Zara nodded and turned to Zach. Ready? He asked softly. Yes, she replied, surprised to find she meant it. Outside, Zach helped her onto his horse, mounting behind her. The feeling of his solid chest against her back was both unfamiliar and comforting. As they rode away from the only home she'd ever known, Zara felt a strange mixture of grief, fear, and exhilaration. Did you mean it? She asked when the house had disappeared from view. About marrying me, Zach's arms tightened slightly around her. I meant every word. But only if it's what you want, Zara. I won't force you into trading one unwanted marriage for another. Why would you do this for me? She pressed. $5,000 is a fortune. Because no one should be sold like cattle, he answered, and because he hesitated. Because I've noticed you for a long time, Zara Reynolds, your kindness to others, your strength through your mother's illness, your determination to keep that ranch going despite your brother's neglect. Zara turned slightly in the saddle to see his face. You noticed all that. A faint smile touched his lips. I notice everything about you. The confession sent warmth spreading through her chest. I've noticed you too, she admitted, but I never thought that I'd notice back. His smile widened. How could I not? They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythm of the horses' hooves a soothing backdrop. What happens now? Zara finally asked as they approached Zach's ranch, a much larger and better maintained property than her family's. Now you rest, Zach said as they came to a stop in front of a handsome two-story house. You've been through an ordeal. I'll prepare the guest room for you, and tomorrow I pay Porter his blood money. Zach's jaw tightened momentarily before relaxing. And then, if you're still certain, we can speak to Reverend Miller about a proper ceremony. Just like that. Zara couldn't hide her surprise. Zach helped her down from the horse, his hands gentle at her waist. Zara, I meant what I said about choice. We can marry, or I can help you start fresh elsewhere, San Francisco, Denver, wherever you wish to go, but I won't lie and say I don't hope you'll stay. Looking up into his earnest face, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, hope. I think I'd like to stay, she said softly. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise after a long night. I'm glad to hear it. Inside the house, Zara was struck by how comfortable it felt. The furniture was simple but well-crafted, the rooms clean and orderly. It wasn't as large as Porter's mansion would have been, but it felt like a home rather than a showpiece. It's lovely, she said, turning in a small circle to take it all in. It's been missing something, Zach replied, watching her. Someone, actually. The implications of his words made her cheeks warm. How long have you felt this way? Zach removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. Since the first time I saw you at the church picnic 2 summers ago, you were helping old Mrs. Thompson with her grandchildren, and you had the most genuine laugh I'd ever heard. 2 years, Zara was astounded. You never said anything. You were grieving your father, then your mother fell ill. The timing never seemed right. He shrugged. And I wasn't sure you'd be interested in a man with my background. Your background, a shadow crossed his face. I wasn't always the respectable rancher you see now. After the war, I rode with some rough men, did things I'm not proud of. But you changed, Zara observed. I wanted something different, something better. His eyes met hers. Something real. The honesty in his voice touched her deeply. Here was a man who had faced his demons and chosen a different path, so unlike her brother, who seemed determined to spiral further downward. I should prepare dinner, Zara said, suddenly aware of the domesticity of their situation. You're my guest tonight, not my cook, Zach insisted. I may not be as talented in the kitchen as you, but I can manage a decent meal. As promised, Zach showed Zara to a comfortable guest room before heading to the kitchen. Left alone, she took the opportunity to wash away the stress of the day and change into clean clothes. The simple act of removing Porter's wedding dress felt symbolic, like shedding an unwanted skin. Dinner was simple roasted chicken, potatoes, and greens from Zach's garden, but prepared with obvious care. They ate at the kitchen table rather than in the formal dining room, and the casual intimacy of it touched Zara deeply. "Tomorrow I'll ride into town early to deal with Porter," Zach explained as they finished eating. "Would you like to come with me, or would you prefer to stay here?" Zara considered. "I'll come with you. I want to face this directly, not hide away." Zach nodded, approval in his eyes. "I thought you might say that. You're not one to back down from a challenge." "Not anymore," Zara agreed, thinking of how close she'd come to a life of subjugation and fear. Never again. That night, lying in the unfamiliar but comfortable bed, Zara struggled to process the dramatic turn her life had taken. Yesterday, she'd been a prisoner in her own home, destined for a marriage that terrified her. Today, she was free, sheltered by a man who respected her choices and apparently had admired her from afar for years. It seemed almost too good to be true, and yet the genuine concern in Zach's eyes couldn't be fabricated. Whatever his reasons, he had saved her from a terrible fate, and for that alone she owed him her gratitude. But was gratitude enough foundation for a marriage? Zara wasn't sure. She was attracted to Zach, certainly. She admired his integrity and courage, but love? That was a bigger question. Her parents had loved each other deeply. She'd grown up watching their affection and partnership. Could she and Zach build something similar from such unusual beginnings? Sleep came eventually, and with it dreams of possibility rather than fear. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through curtains finer than any Zara had known. For a moment, she was disoriented, until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She dressed quickly in her simple clothes, suddenly conscious of how plain they would look beside Zach's evident prosperity. Downstairs, she found him already awake, coffee brewing and bacon frying. He looked up when she entered, his face lighting with a smile that made her heart skip. "Good morning," he greeted. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected," she admitted, moving to help with breakfast. They worked together easily, as if they'd done this 100 times before. By the time they sat down to eat, Zara felt a comfortable rhythm developing between them. "Are you nervous about today?" Zach asked as they finished their meal. "A little," Zara confessed. "Porter isn't a man who likes to lose, and in his mind I'm property he purchased." "He'll have his money," Zach said firmly. "And after today, he'll understand that pursuing this further would be unwise." There was steel beneath his calm tone, and Zara was reminded that beneath the respectable rancher exterior was a man with a reputation that commanded respect and occasionally fear throughout the territory. They rode into town together on Zach's horse, Zara again seated in front of him. The familiar weight of his arms around her already felt like protection rather than confinement. As they passed familiar landmarks, Zara braced herself for the stares and whispers that would inevitably follow. Small towns thrived on gossip, and her aborted wedding to Porter, followed by her apparent elopement with Caldwell, would provide fodder for months. Sure enough, as they rode down the main street, heads turned and conversations halted. Zach seemed unbothered by the attention, his posture relaxed but alert as they approached the bank. Samuel Porter was waiting for them in his office, his expression sour. He wasn't alone. Elijah sat in a corner chair, looking uncomfortable. "Right on time," Porter said coldly as they entered. "I presume you have my money." Zach placed a leather pouch on the desk. "5,000 as agreed." Porter opened the pouch, his fingers counting the gold coins and bank notes with practiced efficiency. "It seems to be in order," he conceded reluctantly. "The contract," Zach prompted. With visible reluctance, Porter removed the marriage contract from his desk drawer and slid it across to Zach. "I still believe this is highly irregular and possibly illegal." "Nothing illegal about a man changing his mind about who he wants to marry," Zach replied evenly, taking the contract and tearing it in half before Zara's eyes. The simple action brought unexpected tears to her eyes. The physical destruction of the document that would have bound her to a loveless, possibly dangerous marriage felt profoundly liberating. Now, Zach continued, his voice hardening slightly, I trust this concludes our business. Porter's eyes narrowed. For now. But understand this, Caldwell, you've made an enemy today. No, Zach corrected calmly. I've prevented you from making a terrible mistake. Miss Reynolds would have made you a miserable husband, and I suspect you would have made her a miserable wife. Consider this a fortunate escape for you both. Porter's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Elijah cleared his throat. Zara, he said, standing awkwardly. I wanted to give you this. He held out a small leather-bound book that Zara recognized immediately their mother's Bible. Thank you, she said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Elijah nodded stiffly. It should stay in the family, and, he hesitated. I'm sorry about everything. The apology, however inadequate, was unexpected. Zara accepted both the Bible and the sentiment with a nod. I hope you find your way, Elijah. Her brother looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Take care of her, Caldwell. I intend to, Zach replied, his hand moving protectively to the small of Zara's back. If that's all, gentlemen, we have a reverend to see. Outside the bank, Zara took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling as though a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Is it really over? She asked. The worst of it, Zach confirmed. Porter may hold a grudge, but he's a businessman at heart. $5,000 soothes many wounds. About that, Zara said hesitantly, I want to repay you. Zach's eyebrows rose. That's not necessary, Zara. It is to me, she insisted. I won't begin whatever this is. In debt to you, I can work. I'm good with numbers and correspondence. I could help with the ranch accounts. A slow smile spread across Zach's face. You want to work alongside me, as partners? Yes, Zara said firmly. If we're to be married, I want it to be a true partnership, not like what Porter wanted and not like my parents had, where my mother was expected only to keep house and bear children. Zach considered this for a moment, then nodded. I admire that, and yes, I could use help with the books. Johnson, my foreman, is excellent with cattle but terrible with numbers. Relief flooded through Zara. He understood. Thank you. Now, Zach said, offering his arm, shall we see if Reverend Miller is available, or would you prefer to wait? Zara hesitated. The events of the past 24 hours had been overwhelming. Marriage was a lifelong commitment, one she'd nearly been forced into against her will. Now that she had a choice, shouldn't she take time to consider it carefully? Perhaps we should wait, she suggested cautiously, watching his face for disappointment. Instead, Zach nodded. Of course, this is a decision that shouldn't be rushed. He squeezed her hand reassuringly. How about we visit the general store instead? You'll need some essentials if you're staying at the ranch. The lack of pressure eased Zara's anxiety considerably. I'd like that. At the general store, Mrs. Peterson nearly dropped her inventory ledger when they walked in. Miss Reynolds. We heard you were to be married to Mr. Porter yesterday. Plans changed, Zach said smoothly before Zara could respond. Miss Reynolds will be staying at my ranch for the time being. Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows nearly reached her hairline, but she was too well-mannered to comment directly. I see. How progressive. And what can I help you with today? Miss Reynolds needs some essentials, Zach explained, seemingly oblivious to the older woman's scandalized expression. Clothing, personal items, whatever she requires. As they moved through the store selecting necessities, Zara became increasingly aware of the whispers and stares from other customers. By the time they reached the counter to pay, her cheeks were burning with embarrassment. People will talk, she murmured to Zach as they waited for their purchases to be wrapped. Let them, he replied, unconcerned. They'll find something else to gossip about next week. They think I'm... She couldn't bring herself to say it. Zach's expression softened. They think you're under my protection, which you are. The rest is nobody's business but ours. His calm confidence was reassuring. As they left the store with their packages, Zara felt herself standing straighter, caring less about the curious eyes following them. Their next stop was unexpected: the telegraph office. I need to send a message to my lawyer in Austin, Zach explained as they entered. Your lawyer, Zara echoed, surprised. About transferring some property into your name, Zach said casually. If you're going to be a true partner, you should have legal standing. Zara stared at him in astonishment. You do that, without us even being married. Marriage is important for social standing and certain legal protections, Zach acknowledged, but property rights shouldn't depend on it. If something happened to me, I want to know you'd be secure. The gesture struck Zara deeply. In a society where women had few legal rights, particularly regarding property, Zach was offering her something precious: independence and security that didn't depend solely on matrimony. Thank you, she said quietly. That means more than you know. After sending the telegraph, they collected their horses and rode back to the ranch. The day was warm but pleasant, the landscape beautiful in the full bloom of late spring. Zara found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's movement, her body naturally aligning with Zach's behind her. Your ranch is much larger than I realized, she commented as they crossed a wide pasture dotted with healthy cattle. 3,000 acres, Zach confirmed. It was run down when I bought it, but the land was good, just needed work and investment. How did you afford it? Zara asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. I'm sorry, that's none of my business, Zach chuckled. It's a fair question. I told you I rode with some rough men after the war. What I didn't mention was that one of those men was my uncle. He taught me to play cards properly, not like your brother's cheating, and I won a significant sum in a high-stakes game in San Francisco. Used it to buy this place. Gambling money. Zara couldn't hide her surprise. Won fair, Zach emphasized, and invested honestly. I've built something real here, Zara, something I'm proud of. The pride in his voice was unmistakable, and Zara found herself admiring his journey from whatever darkness had claimed him after the war to the life he'd built now. Back at the ranch house, they were greeted by Johnson, the foreman Zach had mentioned. A weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes, he tipped his hat to Zara respectfully. Miss Reynolds will be staying with us, Zach informed him. She'll be helping with the accounts and correspondence. If Johnson was surprised by this announcement, he hit it well. Pleased to have you, Miss Reynolds. Boss could use someone with a head for numbers. Zara smiled, warmed by the simple acceptance. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Just Johnson, miss. Everybody calls me that. The rest of the day passed in a whirl of activity as Zara settled into the ranch house. Zach showed her the office where he kept the ranch accounts, introduced her to the cook, Mrs. Hernandez, and gave her a proper tour of the property. By evening, exhaustion had caught up with her. The emotional and physical strain of the past few days finally took their toll, and she found herself struggling to keep her eyes open during dinner. You should rest, Zach said gently, noticing her fatigue. Tomorrow's soon enough to start thinking about ranch business. Zara nodded gratefully. It's been quite a day. The first of many better ones, Zach promised, walking her to her room. At the door, he hesitated. Zara, I want you to know something. Whatever happens between us, whether we marry next week, next year, or never, you have a home here for as long as you want it. The sincerity in his eyes brought tears to hers. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. He smiled, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather light. Sleep well, Zara Reynolds. That night, Zara slept deeply for the first time in months, free from the constant anxiety that had plagued her since her mother's illness began. When she woke, sunlight was already streaming through her window and the smell of coffee drifted up from downstairs. Dressing quickly in one of her new outfits, a practical but attractive blue calico dress, Zara made her way to the kitchen. She found not Zach but Mrs. Hernandez preparing breakfast. Good morning, the older woman greeted her warmly. The boss rode out early with Johnson to check the north pasture. He said to tell you he'll be back by midday. Oh, Zara tried to hide her disappointment. Thank you, Mrs. Hernandez smiled knowingly. He also said you might like to see the account books this morning, get familiar with how things run. They're in his office. After breakfast, Zara made her way to Zach's office, a modest room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large oak desk. The account books were neatly stacked, along with correspondence and supply invoices. Opening the main ledger, Zara was impressed by the orderly entries, though she quickly spotted places where efficiency could be improved. She became so absorbed in the work that she barely noticed the hours passing until a knock at the door made her look up. Zach stood in the doorway, his expression one of pleased surprise. "You look right at home," Zara smiled, suddenly self-conscious. "I hope you don't mind, I've been reviewing your system." "And," he prompted, entering the room and perching on the edge of the desk. "It's good, but there are improvements we could make," she explained, showing him her notes. "If we reorganize the categories and track expenses more specifically, we could identify areas to reduce costs." Zach listened attentively, asking questions and nodding as she explained her ideas. When she finished, he was looking at her with undisguised admiration. "You're remarkable," he said simply. "Where did you learn all this?" Zara shrugged modestly. "My father taught me. He believed women should understand business matters." "My mother handled all the ranch accounts before she became ill." "Your father was a wise man," Zach commented. "Most men wouldn't think to teach their daughters such things." "He was ahead of his time in many ways," Zara agreed, a pang of grief momentarily tightening her chest. "I miss him." "Both of them?" Zach's hand covered hers. "Of course you do, and you always will, but I hope you can build something new here that would make them proud." His understanding touched her deeply. "I think I'd like that." The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Zara took over managing the ranch accounts, freeing Zach to focus on the physical operations. They worked well together, each respecting the other's expertise and contribution. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch watching the sunset, talking about their pasts, their hopes, their views on everything from politics to literature. Zach, it turned out, was surprisingly well-read for a rancher, with a collection of books that rivaled the town library. A week passed, then two. The scandal of Zara's aborted wedding to Porter faded somewhat as the townsfolk adjusted to seeing her and Zach together at church on Sundays and occasionally in town for supplies. There were still whispers, of course, but Zara found herself caring less with each passing day. What did concern her was the growing attraction between them. Zach had been a perfect gentleman, never pressuring her, always respectful of her space and choices. But the glances they exchanged over dinner, the brush of his hand against hers when passing documents, the way her heart raced when he smiled at her, these things couldn't be ignored forever. One evening, nearly 3 weeks after her arrival at the ranch, they sat on the porch swing together, closer than usual as a cool breeze hinted at the approaching autumn. "Zara," Zach began, his voice uncommonly hesitant, "I've been thinking." "Yes," she prompted when he paused. "These weeks with you have been." He searched for the right word. "Illuminating." Zara raised an eyebrow. "Illuminating," he chuckled. "Perhaps that's not the right word. What I mean is, having you here, working with you, talking with you each evening, it's shown me what I've been missing all these years." Her heart quickened. "And what's that?" "Partnership," he said simply. "True companionship. Someone who challenges me, impresses me, makes me laugh." His eyes met hers. "Someone I've grown to care for deeply." Zara's breath caught. "Zach, I'm not asking for anything," he assured her quickly. "I promised you time and choice, and I meant it. I just wanted you to know where I stand." In the soft glow of twilight, his handsome face open and vulnerable, Zach had never looked more appealing. Zara found herself leaning toward him, drawn by something she could no longer deny. "I care for you too," she admitted softly. "More than I expected to." Relief and joy brightened his eyes. "You do?" "Yes," she confirmed, "but I'm still cautious," he finished for her. "As you should be. There's no rush, Zara, we have time." But as he spoke, his gaze dropped to her lips and the tension between them became nearly palpable. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned closer. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question rather than a demand. Zara answered by returning the pressure, her hands coming up to rest lightly on his shoulders. When they parted, both were breathing a little faster. Zach's smile was tender as he brushed his thumb across her cheek. "Worth waiting for," he murmured. Zara smiled back, a warm contentment spreading through her. "Definitely." The kiss changed things between them, not dramatically, but noticeably. There was a new ease in their interactions, an unspoken acknowledgement of the path they were on. They still maintained separate bedrooms, still focused primarily on the ranch during the day, but their evenings grew longer and more intimate, filled with conversation and increasingly passionate embraces. A month after her arrival, Zach suggested they ride into town together. "There's something I'd like to show you," he said mysteriously. Curious, Zara agreed. The ride to town was pleasant, the late summer weather perfect for travel. When they reached the main street, however, Zach guided them not toward the usual shops but toward a handsome building at the far end, the town's only law office. "Why are we here?" Zara asked as they dismounted. "You'll see," Zach replied, offering his hand to help her down. Inside, they were greeted by Mr. Holloway, the town's elderly attorney. "Ah, Mr. Caldwell and Miss Reynolds, right on time. Is everything prepared?" Zach asked. "Yes, indeed, all the papers are ready for your signatures." Holloway gestured them to seats before his desk and produced several official-looking documents. "What is this?" Zara asked, looking between the two men. "Property transfer," Zach explained. "As we discussed, I'm putting a portion of the ranch in your name." "But I thought your lawyer in Austin was handling that," Zara said, confused. "He drew up the papers, but Mr. Holloway will record them locally," Zach clarified. "This makes it official in the county records." Holloway adjusted his spectacles. "If I may explain, Miss Reynolds. Mr. Caldwell is transferring 1/3 ownership of the Caldwell Ranch to you, along with full rights to the profits from that portion. It's an unusual arrangement for unmarried individuals, but entirely legal." Zara stared at the documents in shock. 1/3? Zach, that's too much. "It's what you've earned," he insisted. "Your management has already increased profits by 15% in just a month, and—" he hesitated, "it ensures your independence whatever happens between us." The implication was clear. He was giving her security that didn't depend on marriage or even their continued relationship. It was perhaps the most meaningful gift anyone had ever offered her. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "Say you'll accept it," Zach urged. "Please, Zara, it would mean a great deal to me." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "I accept, thank you." They signed the papers together, Holloway and his clerk witnessing the signatures. When it was done, the attorney handed Zara her copy of the deed. "Congratulations, Miss Reynolds. You are now officially a property owner in Sterling County." The weight of the document in her hands felt significant, a symbol of how dramatically her life had changed in just a few short weeks. From nearly becoming a wealthy man's possession to owning valuable property in her own right, the transformation was remarkable. Outside the law office, Zara turned to Zach, still processing what had just occurred. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," he assured her. "Your partnership is thanks enough." He offered his arm. "Now, would you care to celebrate with lunch at the hotel? I hear they're serving Mrs. Wilson's famous apple pie today." Zara slipped her hand through his arm, a new confidence in her bearing. "I'd like that very much." As they walked down the main street toward the hotel, they passed the general store just as Samuel Porter was emerging. His eyes narrowed at the sight of them, his expression souring. "Caldwell," he acknowledged coldly. "Miss Reynolds." "Porter," Zach returned evenly. The banker's gaze dropped to their linked arms, then to the papers Zara still held. "I see you're continuing to flaunt convention." "We're simply living our lives," Zach replied, his tone pleasant but firm. "I trust you're doing the same." Porter's mouth thinned. "Indeed. In fact, I'll be traveling to St. Louis next week. I have a business arrangement with a family there. Their daughter is of marriageable age." The implication was clear. He'd found another young woman to target. Zara felt a chill despite the warm day. I wish her all the best, she said, unable to keep a note of concern from her voice. Porter's smile didn't reach his eyes. How thoughtful. Good day to you both. As he walked away, Zara tightened her grip on Zach's arm. That poor girl, she murmured. We can't save everyone, Zach said quietly. Though perhaps a letter of warning wouldn't be amiss. Do you happen to know the name of this St. Louis family? Zara shook her head. No, but Mrs. Peterson might. She hears everything. A worthwhile detour after lunch, then, Zach decided. This small exchange, his immediate understanding of her concern, his willingness to help a stranger based solely on Zara's values, cemented something important in her heart. This was a man who truly saw her as an equal partner, who respected her judgment and shared her sense of right and wrong. Over lunch in the hotel dining room, Zara found herself watching Zach with new eyes. The way he treated the serving girl with respect, how he listened attentively when Zara spoke, the quiet confidence that drew admiring glances from other diners, all of it contributed to a growing certainty in her mind. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her thoughtful gaze. "That I'm very fortunate," she answered honestly. "I'm the fortunate one," he countered with a smile. After lunch, they did indeed visit Mrs. Peterson, who was predictably delighted to share what she knew about Porter's St. Louis connections. Armed with a name and address, Zara promised herself she would write a warning letter that very evening. As they prepared to leave town, Zach surprised her by stopping in front of the small church. "I have a question for you," he said, suddenly serious. Zara's heart skipped a beat. "Yes." "Reverend Miller has an opening in his schedule next Sunday afternoon," Zach said, his eyes searching hers. "Would you be interested in filling it?" For a moment, Zara didn't understand. Then realization dawned. "Are you asking me to marry you now?" "I am," Zach confirmed. "Not because of propriety or appearances, but because I love you, Zara Reynolds. These weeks with you have shown me everything I want in a partner and a wife. But if you need more time, no," Zara interrupted, her heart overflowing. "I don't need more time. I love you too, Zach." "Yes, I'll marry you on Sunday." His face lit with joy. "You're sure?" "More sure than I've ever been about anything," she replied, meaning every word. Zach pulled her into his arms right there on the church steps, not caring who might see. Their kiss was a promise, a beginning, a declaration to the world and to each other. The days leading up to Sunday passed in a flurry of preparation. Zara chose a simple but elegant dress from the dressmaker's ready-made stock ivory satin with delicate lace trim, nothing like the ostentatious gown Porter had provided. Mrs. Hernandez and the ranch hands decorated the house for the small reception they would host after the ceremony. On Sunday morning, Zara woke early, her stomach fluttering with anticipation rather than the dread she'd felt on that other wedding day that now seemed so long ago. Mrs. Hernandez helped her dress and arranged her hair with fresh wildflowers. "You make a beautiful bride," the older woman declared with satisfaction. "The boss is a lucky man. We're both lucky," Zara replied, smoothing her dress. A knock at the door revealed Johnson, looking uncomfortable in his Sunday best. "Miss Reynolds, there's someone here to see you." Zara frowned. "Now, we're leaving for the church soon. He insists," Johnson said apologetically. "It's your brother." Surprised, Zara followed Johnson downstairs. Elijah stood awkwardly in the parlor, hat in hands, looking cleaner and more sober than she'd seen him in years. "Zara," he greeted, his voice rough. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied cautiously. "What brings you here?" Elijah shifted uncomfortably. "I heard about the wedding, wanted to wish you well." "Thank you," Zara repeated, studying her brother's face. There was something different about him, a clarity in his eyes that had been missing for a long time. "And to tell you I'm leaving," Elijah continued. "Heading to California, fresh start." "California?" Zara echoed, surprised. "What about the ranch?" "Sold it," Elijah admitted. "To Johnson, actually. He's been saving for years, wanted his own place. It's not much, but it's enough to get me to California and maybe start something new." Zara didn't know whether to be sad or relieved. The ranch held many memories, both good and bad, but perhaps it was better this way. I hope you find what you're looking for there. Me too. Elijah hesitated, then reached into his pocket. Wanted to give you this wedding present, I suppose. He held out a small velvet pouch. Confused, Zara opened it and gasped. Inside was their mother's wedding ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that their father had saved years to buy. Elijah. Tears filled her eyes. She'd want you to have it, he said gruffly, to wear today. Zara impulsively stepped forward and embraced her brother. After a moment's stiffness, he returned the hug. I'm sorry, he whispered against her hair. For everything? I know, she replied. I forgive you. When they separated, both wiped away tears. Will you stay? Zara asked. For the wedding? Elijah shook his head. Best not. Train leaves at noon. He settled his hat back on his head. Be happy, little sister. Caldwell's a good man, better than I was. Take care of yourself, Zara said softly. With a nod, Elijah left, walking out of her life perhaps forever. Zara watched him go, a mixture of sadness and hope filling her heart. Perhaps California would give him the fresh start he needed. Perhaps someday he would find his way back to being the brother she remembered. Slipping her mother's ring onto her finger beside the engagement ring, Zach had given her a beautiful sapphire that matched his eyes. Zara felt a sense of her past and future aligning perfectly. When she arrived at the church an hour later, Zara was surprised by the number of people gathered. It seemed half the town had turned out, along with all the ranch hands and neighboring families. Standing at the back of the church, Zara felt a momentary flutter of nervousness. Then the music began, and she saw Zach waiting for her at the altar, his face lighting with love as their eyes met. Johnson, standing in as a father figure, offered his arm to walk her down the aisle. Ready, Miss Reynolds? He asked. Zara smiled, all nervousness vanishing. More than ready, Mr. Johnson. Walking toward Zach, Zara felt each step bringing her closer not just to him, but to the life she truly wanted, one of partnership, respect, and love. By the time she reached him, her heart was so full she could barely speak. You're breathtaking, Zach whispered as she joined him before Reverend Miller. The ceremony itself was simple but deeply meaningful. When they exchanged vows, Zara's voice rang clear and confident. This was her choice, her decision, her future chosen freely and with full heart. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Reverend Miller declared. You may kiss your bride. Zach gathered her in his arms, his kiss tender but filled with promise. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, Zara caught sight of an unexpected face in the back row, Samuel Porter, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met briefly before he turned and slipped out the door. Zara felt a momentary chill, then dismissed it. Today was too joyful for dark thoughts. The reception at the ranch was festive and warm, with food, music, and dancing continuing well into the evening. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the land that was now partly hers, Zach pulled Zara aside. Happy, Mrs. Caldwell? He asked, his arms encircling her waist. Completely, she assured him, leaning into his embrace. Though I think I'll keep Reynolds for business purposes. Zara Reynolds Caldwell has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Zach laughed. Whatever you prefer, you're my partner in all things now. As the last guests departed and twilight deepened into night, Zach and Zara stood on the porch of their home, arms around each other, looking out at the land that was their shared future. Not quite how I imagined finding a wife, Zach mused, pressing a kiss to her temple. Rescuing you from a forced marriage. Not quite how I imagined finding a husband, Zara returned, being rescued by a neighboring rancher. Do you regret any of it? He asked. Zara thought of all that had happened, the grief, the fear, the unexpected journey that had brought her here to this moment. Not a single moment, she said truthfully. Every step led me to you. Zach's kiss was tender, a prelude to the night ahead. Come inside, wife, he murmured against her lips. Let me show you just how grateful I am that you chose me. Hand in hand, they entered their home, closing the door on the past and stepping together into a future bright with promise and love. In the years that followed, the Caldwell Ranch prospered under their joint management. Zara's business acumen combined with Zach's ranching knowledge created one of the most successful operations in the county. They added a second story to the house, planted an orchard, and eventually welcomed 2 children, a daughter with Zach's blue eyes and a son with Zara's determined spirit. Samuel Porter did indeed marry a young woman from St. Louis, though not the one he'd originally targeted. Zara's warning letter had seen to that. His banking business continued, but he never again achieved the unchallenged power he'd once held in the community, especially after Zach and several other ranchers established a competing bank with fairer lending practices. Elijah wrote occasionally from California, where he'd found work in the growing railroad industry. His letters suggested a man slowly finding his way back to himself, healing from the wounds of war that had nearly destroyed him. 10 years after leaving Texas, he returned for a visit, sober and successful, to meet his niece and nephew and make a fuller peace with his sister. As for Zara and Zach, their partnership only deepened with time. Each challenge they faced: drought years, cattle disease, economic downturns, they met together, stronger for their unity. And each joy: their children's first steps, the expansion of their holdings, quiet evenings on the porch watching the sunset, was sweeter for being shared. On their 20th anniversary, they hosted a grand celebration at the ranch, now the centerpiece of a thriving community. As night fell and lanterns illuminated the yard where friends and neighbors danced and celebrated, Zach found Zara standing apart, watching their teenage children laughing with friends. 20 years, he said, slipping his arm around her waist. Seems like yesterday and forever at the same time. The best 20 years, Zara agreed, leaning into him. Her hair had a few strands of silver now, and the Texas sun had left its mark on both their faces, but the love between them had only grown stronger with time. You ever think about how differently things might have turned out? Zach asked. If I hadn't ridden to your house that day, Zara shuddered slightly, sometimes I think Porter would have broken me eventually. Never, Zach disagreed, tightening his embrace. You're too strong for that. You would have found your way. Perhaps, Zara conceded. But I'm grateful I didn't have to. She turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. I'm grateful for you, Zachary Caldwell, for your courage, your respect, your love. And I'm grateful for you, Zara Reynolds Caldwell, he returned, his eyes still as blue and earnest as the day they'd met. For your strength, your intelligence, your heart. As they sealed these words with a kiss, surrounded by the life and legacy they'd built together, Zara knew with absolute certainty that her mother had been right on that long-ago morning when she'd promised that everything would be all right. More than all right, it had become something extraordinary. From the ashes of grief and the shadow of oppression had emerged a love story written not by force or circumstance, but by choice and courage, their own story, told in their own words, lived on their own terms. And it was, Zara reflected as she and Zach rejoined the celebration hand in hand, the most beautiful story she could have imagined.